Let us pray. Almighty God, on this feast of St. Michael and all angels, commonly called Michaelmas, we ask your blessing on us. May the holy angels guard us and inspire us and lead us forward, and may your Holy Spirit give us wisdom today as we read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest the 24th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel. All this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, so I promised last time that we'd have a little bit of temple thing, or 2 or 3 classes ago when we first got to the temple. If just as a bit of a reminder, either chapter 20 or 21, when we started this section, I think it was 21 with Palm Sunday, and the walk down into Jerusalem down the Mount of Olives. I believe in the timeline of St. Matthew's Gospel, it's a little different. I think it's pretty clear that it's Palm Monday in Matthew's Gospel. The timelines are different. That's something we can talk about a little bit more when we get into Holy Week. Into the last 3 days on Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday. The different evangelists, though, share a similar timeline, but if you begin to try to figure out what day things are happening on, sometimes they don't necessarily agree, and that's life. But we're probably on the same day that, or we're probably on two. Let me see. I've got it somewhere. In any event, he goes into the temple, and I think the next day he goes back to the temple, and all of the teachings that we've had with the parable of the 2 sons and the woes from last week all happened in the temple precincts. And now Jesus is leaving the temple, and we'll read this first thing, and then I've got a little bit of video and photos from Israel that I hope are interesting, and we can take a look at those. But so let's start off by reading where we are and do that. Okay, can somebody see this? Can everybody see this? Okay, I don't know who was on first. Barbara, you were on first. Can you read just that first little bit, the temple's fate? You got to unmute, though.
Out of practice. Now Jesus left the temple and was going away. His disciples came to point out to him the temple buildings. He responded, "Do you see all these things? I assure that no stone will be left on another. Everything will be demolished."
Okay, so what I want to do, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second and then reshare, is so I think you all know this. I went to Israel this past March with, who else was there? Patrice was there on this trip, and Barbara was there the last time we went in 2018. And Barbara will remember this, that we didn't get up to the Temple Mount.
No.
And we didn't get to see the Dome of the Rock and get the scope of it. Patrice had been before. On your first trip, were you able to get up there?
Yes, we were.
So you've been up there a couple of times. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did either of you, has anybody else been to Jerusalem? Okay. Did either of you get up there on other occasions without the group?
No, the first time I went, it was scary, I thought, because there was a lot of police action in there, and Iyad was looking all around and he was twittering, and I'm like, I got to get out of here, because if he's twitching, I'm twitching.
So he wasn't literally twittering. He was not tweeting. He was
like, he's looking all around. He's looking all around, like, this is good. This is good. The second time I went, it was much calmer.
Right. Well, so when we were there in March, Patrice, you may remember this. It was all very calm when we first arrived, and it was beginning to get uncalm before you all arrived. There was some street stabbings and things like that. And by the time we had left, or right after we left, there was that whole business of, there was a group that was trying to sneak a goat up to the temple. Do you remember this?
Yeah, because it was Passover. It was a whole bunch of things all at the same time.
Easter, Passover, and Ramadan were all coming up.
Time, right.
Right, the week after we left. And there was a group that was trying to sneak a goat up onto, this was in the news, and they were trying to sneak a goat or something up onto the Temple Mount to do a sacrifice, which obviously would not have gone over very well. And They ended up there was a riot that happened in Al-Aqsa Mosque a couple of days after we left, and the Israeli police and the Palestinian Muslims were they were throwing rocks at the police, and the police ended up storming Al-Aqsa, which was really bad, and the whole thing got shut down for at least a couple of weeks. I don't know if it's open yet. All that is to say, when I went with the group this spring, I was there 2 weeks earlier, and we went up with the group, but I went up on my own, and it was empty. There was nobody there, and I got some video of that. So I'd like to show you some of said video, if that's okay. I think it gives you a sense of what the place is like today. I will say that as a little bit of background, it's worth remembering the original temple and Temple Mount is built by Solomon, David's son, and that lasted for some time before it was destroyed and by the Babylonians, and they end up rebuilding it in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. And that story of the rebuilding of the temple is in those two books of Ezra and Nehemiah, if you ever want to read about it. And they rebuilt the temple. In Ezra and Nehemiah, you can tell that it was a little smaller at that point than people had remembered it. And that second temple stayed intact for a very long time, all the way up until King Herod's time, as in Herod the Great, who shows up at the beginning of St. Matthew's Gospel. And those of you that have been to the Holy Land and to Jerusalem and the surrounding areas may remember, or you may have been to, there's a number of famous buildings projects that King Herod the Great did. Masada, Patrice, you've been to Masada. Has anybody else been to Masada? I've been there. I climbed Masada. Did you climb Masada, or did you cable car up?
No, I never went to Masada.
Oh, you never got there? Okay.
No.
Herodian is another one. They're both cities on top, well, towns on top of, or castles or whatever, on top of mountains, and prodigious buildings projects. And he did a number of other ones, but one of the ones that he did was King Herod expanded the entire Temple Mount and the plaza around it. And he did not rebuild the temple, but I believe what happened was they expanded on the temple. And so it remained active during this buildings project, but they expanded it and made it much bigger. And so by the time you get to Jesus's time, he's dealing with the super expanded Temple Mount Plaza, and he's dealing with a larger temple than had been. And that lasts up until 70 AD, when the Romans come in, and there's a revolt, and the Romans come in and destroy the temple and attempt to destroy as much as they can of the plaza around it, which had gigantic stones, and they throw them down. And what we just read, where it said, "I assure you no stone will be left on another, everything will be demolished." In 70 AD, that was basically what happened, though it's worth noting that Herod's building project was so huge that they really were not able to do much to the plaza itself. And in the last 2,000 years, what has happened is, first, I could be getting my timeline on this. First, though, I believe the Romans set up a Roman temple on top of the Temple Mount, and eventually they did the same thing to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre when that had been built, and they eventually set up a Roman temple on top of where the Holy Sepulchre had been. That got rebuilt, the Holy Sepulchre, and eventually when Christians took over during the Crusades, they not only expanded the Holy Sepulchre, but they also took over the Temple Mount buildings. In the meantime, though, things like Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock had been built. So your timeline is that in 70 AD, everything is destroyed. The Romans sort of set up shop for a little bit. The Christians eventually take over under Constantine around 300-ish. And the Temple Mount from Constantine times on there's nothing there. And then Muslims come and ask permission, and I may have some of the details wrong, but I think the general gist of this is that the Muslims come and ask permission because they viewed it as a holy place where Muhammad had ascended during his night vision. And so the Christians basically said, you can have it, we're not using it, and built the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. You fast forward to the Crusades, the Crusaders come in, and they were confused in lots of different ways. But some of the Crusaders thought that Al-Aqsa Mosque was Solomon's stables, and they thought that some of them even thought the Dome of the Rock was the original temple. So they didn't really know what they were doing. But they ended up taking both of them over, and Al-Aqsa became a garrison, and it's big. You'll see some of the video of it. And the Dome of the Rock became a church. And eventually the Muslims took over and they were reverted back to what they were supposed to be, which is Muslim holy sites. All of that gives you some semblance of the last couple thousand years. People have disagreed greatly over how to use these spaces and fight continually about them. When you get there today, it is the Temple Mount, which is literally the heart of the old city of Jerusalem. So much so that when you're wandering around, you continually encounter these green doors that are all over the place to get in. And you can't get in unless you're a Muslim. And there's only one access for non-Muslims to get in at certain hours. And you can go up and you can visit at those hours. But the reason that you can't get in those places is because of all the troubles that they've had over the centuries, and everybody trying to sort of take it over and take it back. But when you get into it, you, as Patrice had noted with security and this sort of thing, there are Israeli police everywhere, and technically it's controlled by, I think, Jordan. The whole relationship is very strange, but it basically, it's, if you can imagine this, it's one of the most holy Muslim sites, one of the most holy Jewish sites. Some Christians think it's very holy in different ways, but for Christians, there's never really been a holy church there. But Christians have always viewed it as a holy site as well. And when you get up there, usually it's mobbed and really crowded, and there's lots of tour groups. And as Patrice noted, sometimes it can be a little interesting in terms of the things that are going on. And sometimes it's not.
Well, it was very tense because the Jews are not allowed to go in, and they were trying to get in. And so that's a big deal. So you can say non-Muslims can go in, but Jews are not allowed in.
That was true when you went up the previous time, but now the Jews are allowed up. It's opened up a little bit, and that has created some problems. And they're really supposed to go, everybody is supposed to go without any overt, unless you're Muslim, if you're a Christian, you're not supposed to go up there and try to lead prayer services. If you're a Jew, you're not supposed to go up there and sort of overtly do things. And when we were in this run up to Ramadan and Passover and Easter that were all converging at the same time, there were more and more Jewish groups trying to go up and overtly do things. And there were also more and more Christian groups trying to go up and do things too. All of this was in the news, and it was more sort of the more extreme sides of every group that were dealing with this. I think in some of my videos, which we'll see in a second, you can actually see I ran in. So when I went in, and I'm not sure that this made the video, but when I went in, I'm alone. I went up, and there's another guy that went up with me who was Orthodox or Hasidic Jew. And the security stopped us both because they thought we were together, and separated us apart. And eventually they let him in, and then they were still talking to me. And I was like, I just am a priest trying to get up here and see this. And they let me through. And that was the only issue I had. But then as I was up there during the day, I did notice that there were, and this may be in one of the videos, in one point I ran into a group of maybe 20 or 30 Hasidic Jews that were doing tours of things and saying prayers. And I just thought this probably is not going to go over all that well. And little did I know a month and a half later or a month later, we were going to end up with what ended up happening. But I sort of saw the front end, and I may have gotten some of this detail wrong, but
Matt, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do the Jews believe that that is where Moses, the tablet, the Ten Commandments is housed?
I don't believe so. That's Mount Sinai, which is in the wilderness, right? That whole never say never. There could always be some group that does, but I believe that the Temple Mount is in Jerusalem. Mount Sinai is in the Sinai wilderness in the desert, right? The Moses account of the Ten Commandments is also linked to the tabernacle, right? So they're in the wilderness wandering at that point, or on the front end of wandering. Having left Egypt, they go into the wilderness after crossing the Red Sea. He goes up onto Mount Sinai and receives the law. And if you remember the whole story, he gets the tablets, he comes down, they're sacrificing to Baal. He gets mad, he throws the tablets on the ground. As an aside, there's a fairly entertaining Mel Brooks movie that has the 15 commandments and the 10 commandments. But Moses goes back up and gets a new set of tablets, comes back down. And part of the instructions that he receives are how to build a tabernacle and the ark, and the tablets end up in the ark along with the staff that Aaron had and some manna. And the tabernacle instructions of how to set it up are in Exodus, as are the tabernacle, the ark, and they go from place to place with the tabernacle is like the portable temple. Basically, it's like a tent version of the temple, and they go from place to place to place to place to place. And that model with the ark and the tent tabernacle continues all the way up until Solomon's time, when he finally builds a temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, which is traditionally the same place that Abraham and Isaac go when Abraham is going to sacrifice Isaac, is on Mount Moriah, on top of a rock. And the temple is built on top of a rock, and the dome of the rock is built on top of the rock, right? And so there's a giant rock that all these things happen. And when you get a lot of scripture about God as my rock, or on this rock I will, that reference is important because the temple is built on top of this same rock that traditionally is where Isaac was not sacrificed, where Abraham, was told the Lord will provide, and where the temple is built and then destroyed and then rebuilt and then expanded upon and then destroyed in 70 AD. And then the Dome of the Rock is believed to be built, if not on the exact same place, pretty near it. Another thing that's worth noting, and you'll see this in some of the video, is when you consider a buildings project that's made of solid rock, that is the Temple Mount, consider how deep down it goes and what the foundation is, and also consider how much may or may not be inside of it. They've never fully excavated all of the rooms that may or may not have been underneath the Temple Mount, because there's some things that are there. Al-Aqsa is built and it's a building, but there's a whole complex that goes down into the Temple Mount underneath it that's part of it. And the Temple Mount is enormous. And so this whole other area, there's a lot that could be excavated. And a question is where did the Ark of the Covenant go, right? It was removed. I believe it's Jeremiah in the book of Jeremiah that says he removes it and hides it. And so one tradition is he hides it in, off in the wilderness in some cave. There's another tradition that it ends up getting hidden underneath the Temple Mount in some secret room. And then there's another tradition that the Ethiopians have it. And so where is it? Nobody knows. But to this day, you are not allowed to excavate underneath the Temple Mount. And whenever archaeologists begin to excavate near and around it, people get upset because you're excavating into a holy site from the Muslim perspective. And so it's really interesting. Anyway, I hope these videos are vaguely useful. I think that they're, I had a good time making them. They're not that long. It's a whole series. If you want to watch more from my Holy Land trip, they're all on our YouTube page. But for today, I want to start some of this, and then I'll show you some photos. Can everybody see the video of me right now? Because I can't see any of you anymore.
No,
No.
No.
just a black square.
All right. How about, can you see anything now or not? No?
No.
Nope.
Let's
No.
try.
No.
Let's
No.
try again. How about that?
Yes.
Photo of you.
All right.
Oh,
hold on.
it went
Get
away.
All right,
Yeah,
how
no,
about,
just vanished.
all right. How about that?
A photo.
There.
All right. How about that? Can you still see it? Is it black with larger?
We can see a picture of you.
Okay,
not
but it's
full-
bigger. It's like full
Picture of
screen?
you with a baseball cap on.
Okay, this
and
is technology,
sunglasses.
and as they say, it just works. So hopefully you can hear it. All right, there's a string of videos. They're all short. Like this one's 9 seconds, but let's watch them. And I apologize because it's YouTube. There will be ads from time to time. So if you get an advertisement, I do not endorse any of them for what it's worth.
I'm on my way this morning. It's Sunday. It's about 7 a.m. to the Temple Mount to try to get up there for church and breakfast. As you can see, it's sunny out. Good morning from the Western Wall. It is
No video, Matt, just the photo of you.
Just the audio.
Ah, good. Okay. All right. I will. Let's do it from here. It's not ideal, but I think I can zoom in. Can you? This is awesome.
Different photo of you.
Yeah. Well, there are videos, but let's try this. Okay. Can you see it now? Still? Nothing? You can't see anything.
Different photo of you.
Right, but you can see that. Yes?
Yeah, but it's not moving. It's not a video. It's just looks like a photo.
I have to press
Yeah,
play.
just like a photograph.
Good
Oh, here we
morning
go.
from the Western Wall.
Now you're good.
It is about 7:15. I'm going to attempt to make my way up to the mount. It's 7:20. There was no line, which is nice. Sunday in March at 7 a.m. Not a bad time. But I'm making my way up to the Dome of the Rock and the Temple Mount. I'm up on the Temple Mount. Behind me is the Al-Aqsa Mosque and a purification fountain. And there's the Dome of the Rock. The scope up here of size is amazing. It's gigantic. And it's quite nice with the sunrise. Very happy. Obviously, there is a rich history of the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock. It's a very holy place. It's a nice way to start my Sunday up here. I'm going to head down to St. George's for church in a bit, but not until 9:30 or so. I'm still up at the Dome of the Rock at the Temple Mount. The security up here is probably as it always has been, to be honest. There's some police all over the place, but if you read the New Testament, you'll see that there were Roman guards up there as well during Jesus' time. But pretty cool. I believe it's controlled by the Jordanian government, which is interesting, but check it out on your own. See if I can get the sunshine.
So it was empty while I was there, which was really neat. And I wasn't allowed to go into Al-Aqsa or
I'm down now in the park
Dome of the Rock.
below, the garden rather, below the, that's more of a park, below the Temple Mount. When you are wandering around the old city, occasionally you'll see these green doors that allow access into this garden, and you can see this sort of sea of green from a sea of stone that you're in the old city. And it's very tempting to get into, but you can't get into it unless you are a Muslim. And so I'm very happy and grateful to be up here on Sunday. The non-Muslims come through a different entrance, but it's very, very beautiful down here. Give you a sight of it.
this is still
I
all
should say,
part of the
if you can
Temple
see
Mount.
Cats, there's cats everywhere, which is one of the nice features of Jerusalem. Until you've been up here, it's hard to appreciate how much the Temple Mount is the heart of the city. There's paths leading from almost every gate directly to it, if you can access them. but it's the only open green space I've been to in the entire old city. And when I say open and green, it's really green and really open and really beautiful, and stands in sharp contrast to the rest of the old city, which is very narrow and stony and beautiful, but tight. This is open. Very beautiful. I'm going to give you a walking view as I approach the Dome of the Rock. Should get a sense of the entire plaza up here. The original temple was up here. This is Herod's Temple Mount, so this is quite a bit later, after Solomon's temple was destroyed, and then the second temple was built, and then Herod rebuilt a lot of this area and built the Temple Mount itself, or expanded it rather, and then it was destroyed by the Romans, the temple itself, in 70 AD, and the Dome of the Rock was built several hundred years later, and it's an amazing holy place up here.
What are Herod's
Having never
dates,
been up
Matt?
here, one of the things that I didn't
Say it
appreciate
again?
was just how many trees.
What are Herod's
it was
dates?
around
Herod's
the edges.
dates.
There's-
Like 30 BC to, he reigned for a while, maybe 20 AD.
So,
I don't have him off the top of my head, but it was for a while, and he was in his prime, so to speak, by the time Jesus is born.
so yeah, pre-imperial Rome.
Yeah, but he was, so there's a city called Caesarea, right, that Herod built, that I have other videos of if you want to watch those on your own. And he built it as a way of honoring his friend August Octavian, and to reference Caesar and Julius Caesar. So it's in the transition to full-blown imperial Rome. And he is, by the time you get to Jesus's ministry, it's full-blown imperial Rome at that point. Tiberius is the emperor. So Herod the Great is more in the Octavian sort of Augustus time. And a lot of the buildings projects were, and the Temple Mount, I think, is one of them too, where Masada is certainly like this, as is Caesarea, were designed to impress foreign, mostly Roman, but foreign dignitaries. He'd invite people in to his palace on the sea at Caesarea, where they had all these games and all this other stuff. And it was all very Greek and Roman, and not very Jewish in any way, shape, or form. And that was one of the problems that people had with him, was basically he was everything he was interested in was Roman or sort of Hellenistic or something like that. And so, yeah, but yeah, a lot of this is built to put Judea, Jerusalem, the province, on the map, so that it became an important place and a destination where people would go. And so part of Herod's thinking, I believe, was in a somewhat significant part to highlight the fact that our Jewish religion is actually way older, and this is, than the Roman religion and the Greek religion, and so it was important that he had something that not only rivaled the major religious sites in Greece or in Italy or in other places, but in some ways that it was even bigger and grander. And I've never seen any plaza that's like this. Is the closest sort of gigantic plaza that I can think of is really what you get in DC at some of these huge government monument plaza things. This is massive. And I said it in one of those videos. You sort of go off the Temple Mount down the stairs. You saw me go up at one point, and you're off of this giant stone plaza, but you don't leave the area. You're off down, still in the walled in area, and you're in basically a huge park. And so it was designed to be the religious and probably cultural center of the entire city. So a little bit more video. Let's.
Thank you.
Lots of trees all over the place, and it's really a wonderful, peaceful place to say prayers.
Well, it was peaceful because I was alone. That's the other thing. I mean, I think
From up here, you get a really good sense of what the wall and defenses were supposed to be like. You can sort of see.
So-
there's such a long stretch of it that's open.
this is worth noting. The Romans destroyed basically everything, all the wallish stuff. And you can, all over Jerusalem, you can see when different eras are building things. And almost invariably, the large stones are the Herod ones, and none of these are Herod stones, for what this is worth, right here on this wall. This is probably a Crusader era wall, and the smaller stones as you go up are more recent. And so this is actually probably not Herod's defenses at all. It's probably much later, but it remains sort of fortified.
You can sort of see, I think, what maybe it originally was envisioned, at least up here.
And I'll show you some Herod stones soon in this.
And of note is, I'm not sure if those are sort of detritus stones. I think they are, or if those are for rebuilding things when they break, but there's a lot of area sort of construction-y stuff over there. It's Sunday morning. You can hear the bells ringing from the churches in the old city. I'm over here by the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and one of the things I want you to note is that I'm actually on a roof. You see the little thing right there, the skylight and vent? They're all over the place. The Temple Mount was not just a thing that things stood on, that the temple stood on and other things. There were rooms and lots of things underneath, and that continues to this day.
That's Al-Aqsa right here. It's gigantic, and it goes underneath. I'm standing on basically under rooms of it.
It has not been excavated, but in this area at least there is an active building below my feet.
Lightsabers are finally a reality, and you can own one. This new military flashlight is basically a light.
There we go.
You can hear the bells in the background on Sunday morning. The call to Christian prayer, which reminds me, I need to get to church. You can see the beautiful mosaics on the Dome of the Rock.
All right. So
I'm back at the Western Wall. One of the advantages of being a
So I took a tour underneath the temple. So that's what this next set is. And this, you'll get to see all of the Herod stones, which are gigantic.
known is you can score a ticket to almost anything very quickly. So I'm going into the tunnels at the Western Wall. I got a ticket in 5 minutes, which is very cool. The group behind me, they couldn't get tickets. So sometimes it's good to be traveling alone, and frees you up a little bit. God bless. Have a happy Sunday, and I'll talk to you later. I'll show you the wall before I go.
That's the Western Wall. You'll see more of it in a second.
Yes. So this is the room we went in, we came in here, and then we saw our Johnsons over here. And then structure. It's all part of the same structure that we believe was built, we're not sure, but it's going to be a good question. So when did we find this? So 1867, that's about Christian quarters, and yet.
So this is the beginning of Herod
we did
walls,
excavations
these
in the
things.
Jewish quarter part of it. We found vast homes of the priests, and they had under their houses, in their basement, they had these neat rooms, dug these shafts, and it's above us, so they add this nice modern ceiling. Only the past year or two. This is pretty new. All these excavations here. So let me show you my picture.
You see how big they are?
We've got back here the picture.
That's the Western Wall right here.
And then we'll have a model of the temple soon, so you'll see it closer up. And you've got here this glass arch. Glass arch is wider because underneath the western wall, look, my fingers here because it's not very, the western wall between my two fingers. Not very big. Not very big.
You see how far down it goes?
Meters, about 80 meters wide here. And the whole
Like we're probably 30 or 40 feet underground at least already.
Just want to note, this is the Western Wall, but it's much lower and it's much smoother and not weather worn. People are still putting their prayers in down here.
You see the prayers, the little pieces of paper right there?
not bedrock yet. Now, somebody asked about the holes.
Okay, this is worth noting. This is, I think it's called the Great Stone. It is one stone and it's very, very big, just to give you some sense of how big Herod's stones
Not bedrock
sometimes
yet.
were.
Now, somebody asked about the holes. If you look here in these stones, you see these stones sticking out. There's like 3 stones. Later period, the Romans were not using the Temple Mount, not important to them, but they wanted a pool of water. And they said, well, we have a wall, why build 4 walls? We have to.
I got an email from this company called Unison, and they were like, "Yo, check out this MIDI chord pack." I said, "Nah."
Same stone. See how big it is? Keeps going on. This is a synagogue underneath the Western Wall.
So they add these fiberglass things so that the water doesn't drip on the side. Because there's a building upstairs and they just, I guess, they have no way of having access to figure out where that water was coming from. Rain, rain pipes,
I just finished the tour of the tunnels. I'm now
All right, and this is the last thing I'll show you. You can see all the stones that were thrown down by the Romans, and this gives you a sense of, on ground level as I go through, what the destruction looked like. And a lot of it has just been left there. They've excavated or cleaned up some of it, but a large amount of it is still just there from 2,000 years ago, stones that were thrown off the top and dropped down.
in the excavation area below the Temple Mount, off of the Western Wall.
So right here, this is the side, this is part of the Western Wall of the temple. And this thing right here was an access point. And if you look carefully, you can see the stones are much smaller up here and much bigger as it goes down. But there was a ramp or a staircase that went up from here to here. And this was one of the main entrances into the temple. And this whole area up here, there would have been very large rocks that were pushed off and thrown down. And you can see some of them, the size of them right here. They don't look very big in this picture, but when I get down there, I think you get a better sense of how big it was.
You can really get a sense of how far down the temple wall really originally went. Those stones were thrown off when the Romans destroyed the temple, but you get a sense of how far down it really is and how big it is. That's the Temple Mount. Right now I am at the base of the Temple Mount. It's big.
So like, let me go back a tiny bit. If you look,
It's big.
right That's a crater formed by a stone thrown off the Temple Mount. Right, and there's a bunch of them. This is a Herod era road that's sitting here, and when the Romans throw things off, it destroyed the road, but it made giant craters. And the rock that was there, as I said, they've excavated and cleaned up some of it, but these rocks here, they've just been left there for 2,000 years. They've just been sitting there.
It's big. It's really big. So one of the things that's really interesting about this is these giant stones right behind me were thrown down in 70 AD by the Romans. Do you see where it changes from thick stones from Herod's wall to the smaller ones that are much later? The Romans, when they destroyed the temple, tried to destroy the Temple Mount too. And so there's these gigantic stones. Further down is a replica of the shofar area where the trumpeter would stand and blow the trumpet on the Sabbath. But check these stones out. These are very, very large, and one wonders how the Roman soldiers threw them off, but there were a lot of them, I guess, and they dealt with stones and things. Very, very interesting. Up there was where the trumpeter would blow the shofar, and right here is the inscription. This is a replica, but you can see the inscription of the location where he would have stood and blown the trumpet. So it's a long way down, but it gives you a sense of what was destroyed.
Meet your next pillow. Why do we make our pillow in the shape of a cube?
YouTube.
I'll tell you.
All right, just a couple more and then we'll wind down.
That area behind me, right there on the wall, was a support for an entry gate, and it's called Robinson's Arch because a man named Robinson discovered it during excavations. But this was the base of it, this whole area right there, and it was a staircase or a path, but it was one of the entrances up into the Temple Mount. Below me you can see the giant hole in what was the street where some of the stones fell. Those were clearly moved, but you can sort of see the crater that was created when the stones fell down. This gives you a sense of the size of some of these stones. There was a particularly giant one called the Large Stone. In the tour for the tunnels, which I did take some video and photos of, but this one is nowhere near as big as that. But just to give you a sense of how big they are very, very large. This is actually for one of my friends, Luke Schulte, who is a Bible scholar in Old Testament and has done excavations and...
All right, so let me stop. If you're interested, watch more on your own. They're all on the YouTube page, but I kept going all the way around, and I do want to show one other thing if I can find it. So there's a couple of gates that are, so I'll show this and then I'll wind down. Let's see. Okay. I'm still at the Temple Mount here, and I actually got lost.
Quick story, I've been down here for a while, and it's beginning to remind me in some way of Pompeii. When my wife and I went to Pompeii on our honeymoon, we got lost in the city, and I'm at the point where I have no clue where I am in these excavations. I'm enjoying them, but I don't know when they're going to end. And so if I don't get out, I'll see you at some other point. This is a set of gates called the Hulda Gates, which lead up into the Temple Mount. They are very old, but people would have come up, probably not these stairs, but they would have come up a set of stairs through those gates, which are obviously bricked up, but they would have been open at some point. And I may be coming out of the excavations, but maybe not. We'll see. Here I am up at the Older Gates. These are the eastern gates. And one of the entrances that would have led to the temple. These are second temple period gates.
All right. Anyway, there was a lot of video. Any questions or comments? Sorry for taking an entire Bible study to do video stuff, but
It was great.
No, it was enlightening.
Yeah,
Very,
it was wonderful.
very powerful. Matt. Very
Yeah.
powerful.
there's another gate. I didn't get to it until later in the trip, and so I don't have video readily available. But there's the two sides of the complex, the whole Temple Mount complex, are open. The western side is not, right? That was where all those stones had been thrown down. That's where the western wall is. And over the years, in recent times, that has been excavated and opened up into, there's a plaza there now, but there wasn't originally. There was stuff all over it, in the areas below, but the north side is basically buried into the city. And so all the gates on the north side are where that park is, where all the trees are. That's the north side. And there's still gates that are active over there, and there's still gates that are active on the northwest section of it, that if you're in Israel or Jerusalem are these green doors that you can go in if you're Muslim. I did try once, accidentally, I have to say, I tried once to go through one of the green doors, and they were like, no, you cannot. Men with guns came up to me, and actually that's not even true. Teenagers with machine guns who are 18 or something came up to me and said you're going the wrong way, and turned me around and sent me back the other way. But they were very nice. And but on the western side, it's now excavated, and that's the Western Wall, where you can get in if you're not a Muslim, and where those excavations and the under things were. The south side, there's a whole bunch of excavations below where Al-Aqsa Mosque is that are outside. And then the east side, where these gates are that I was just at, is where it turns into a gigantic cemetery if you keep going over, that you've probably seen pictures of from the Mount of Olives that goes up. And there's one of the most famous gates, which is called, I think it's the Golden Gate, is on the east side. And there's some traditions that the apocalypse will happen or something when the Golden Gate is finally opened and the Messiah goes through it. And it is intentionally a cemetery there, in large part to keep anybody from trying to restore that gate. If you think about the logic there, right? It's really difficult when you have to move a cemetery. And so that's up against the Golden Gate. And you can visit it, but it's still an active cemetery. When I visited there were still people there was people that were visiting recent graves and things like that. But yeah, I hope that's helpful. It was really neat. The videos are online if you want to watch them. But
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, yeah.
Hopefully this isn't a stupid question. Where is the Wailing Wall?
So that's a great question, actually. It's the Western Wall is the Wailing Wall.
Okay.
And the title of it as the Wailing Wall more goes back to a time when it was, I'm going to mess up my history on this, but it's when it was basically retitled when the state of Israel was founded and the Jewish people took control of the area. Prior to that, they were not allowed really even to visit it. Therefore, that was as close as one could get, was the Western Wall. And it was called the Wailing Wall because wailing over the destruction of the temple, and also literally as close as you could get. That, if you remember, the same feeling is there. Patrice and I talked a little bit about this at the beginning, where it's a little more open than it had been. There, when I was up there, they were allowing Jewish people to go up. I don't know if that's the case right now because of what had happened in the spring, but years back that was not the case, and so it's gotten a little more looser than it was. But one of the big conflicts is anytime the Israeli state kind of creates a closer and there's creeping closer and closer to the getting as close as you can get. Do you remember the video of that synagogue that I showed that was down there? That is, so the closest you can get is the Western Wall, except there's an area just to the left of the Western Wall that is a little closer that you can get to if you are granted access into it. And Patrice will know this, and Charlotte, I think, will know this too, and Barbara will remember this too. The women are allowed on the right side, which is farther away from where the temple would have been. The men are allowed on the left side of the wall, which is a little closer. And then there's another area that's to the left of that, that's indoors, that's a little closer. And then the closest you can get is in that synagogue down below, which is right as close as one can get without actually going in. And we did ask, as somebody asked in the group, how much does it cost to have a service in the synagogue? And she said more than any of us can afford. So it's
Western world felt very spiritual. So that's where you leave your prayers. And then I heard later that they actually take them out once a week and burn them, because so many people go there and so many people stick the things in the prayers in there. That's what I heard. They take them out and they burn them so that you can.
Yeah, I believe that's true. Yeah.
But that was a nice place to be.
It's very, very prayerful and spiritual and kind of and sad. It's you go up, you're not I think the women everybody has to wear a hat, right? Or head
covering.
Then you have to walk out backwards. You have
right.
To put your back to the wall. So you have to go in and then step backwards.
Right. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of services that are there and people are gathered there praying together or alone. And when I was alone, I went in like at midnight or something, and there's always people there. It's open all night. And obviously
you see some of the school women. Well, of course, I was on the women's side, and they are, really praying very, very enthusiastically and demonstratively.
It's
all different ages there too.
All different ages. It's used one of the days. I'm sure I have video of it somewhere, but one of the days when the group was there, Patrice, I don't know if you were there. There was like a graduation of the army or something was going on.
Yes.
And we were there. I was there. I know Arrow was there. So we were there and I couldn't find Arrow. And he's like, I'm in the Western Wall Plaza. It was like, right, there's like 100,000 people here. So where are you? And it was, I saw it empty-ish. It was never empty, but I also saw it as crowded as it can be. And there's a lot of tension there between who can go where, and it cuts in every direction. Certain people are, depending on who you are, you can get into certain areas and you can't get into other areas. And for every area that only Muslims can go, there's other areas where only Jews can go, and the Christians are just kind of in there. They're there, and they sort of control their sites, but they don't even have the key literally to the door that locks up the Holy Sepulchre at night. So
Matt, I have to go.
All right. Bye.
See you next
Anybody
week.
has any other questions, I'll handle them.
Thank you.
Yep. Next week we'll finish chapter 24 and go from there. But on our YouTube page, if you scroll down, you can find the various other videos, and you can see Caesarea. You can see all sorts of things. And, you know, I apologize for the blurro vision of moving the camera around, but it's, I think it gives you a better sense sometimes than the photos do. So, all right.
Nope, thank you.
Fantastic.
God
Matt.
bless.
Thank you so much.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.